Good afternoon to everybody. Today I will be talking about, as Tomar has said, on interaction of radiation with matter. On Friday, I will talk about the detection and measurement. And the PowerPoint of both the lectures are, I think, HBNI will upload now. So this is an important topic because for any aspect to do with the radiation identification, measurement, presence or absence, etc., first we should understand how the radiation interacts with the matter. In general, these radiations are called ionizing radiations. So first part is we should know what is the meaning of this. So accordingly, the plan of the lecture consists of general principle where I spend about 5 minutes and that will give a clear idea about radiation interaction. Then I will take the individual radiations and talk about heavy charged particles, essentially with, I'll be covering alpha, and then electrons, then electromagnetic radiations, and of course, interaction of neutrons. And I will also complete its detection, that is neutron detection, in this slide itself because there is a meaning for it. And I summarize and close the lecture here. Whereas on Friday, I will talk about the radiation detection and measurement. And that plan I have given here, which I will also repeat on Friday. So we talk about the principle. What is the general principle? There are two types of radiations. Radiations that are having charge, that is alpha, beta. By this time, you know, we call generally alpha, beta, gamma as radiations, right? And there are two types, is it not? Alpha and beta have charges. We have already seen equivalence of alpha is helium nucleus and beta is a fast moving electron or a positron, and gamma is electromagnetic radiation, gamma or X-ray, right? So we can classify them into two types, one that has charge, other one that do not have charge. So how this interacts, when it goes, why are we worried about these radiations? Because one most important thing is all these radiations have huge energy compared to general electrons in the general medium, in the matter. So what happens is when a charged particle passes through the matter, it loses energy continuously because of Coulombic interaction with the electrons in the matter. So there is a possibility, you just think about an isolated atom. For simplicity, is the picture is like this, which consists of nucleus and electrons. An isolated atom. Actually, matter consists of molecules. That will come later. Now, suppose an alpha particle, for again simplicity, I have taken a charged particle, and compared to the velocity of the electrons in the matter, alphas or electrons, they move pretty fast. So it goes like a knife in the matter. And when it is going, alpha is having a positive charge. Electrons that are bound in the atom have a negative charge. The natural interaction will be an attraction of electron towards the alpha particle. So when the extent of the attraction, or you call it impact, is more than the binding energy of the electron in the atom or molecule, right? Then what happens is that electron will be removed from the influence of the nucleus of that atom. So electron comes away from the atom. But doesn't mean that it will come along with the alpha, no. So this process we call ionization. It can be atomic ionization, it can be molecular ionization. Net result is an electron will be removed by fast moving alpha particle. So when a charged particle like alpha moves through the matter, along the path, it will produce ionization. And that is quite useful. At the same time, quite difficult to have the ionized matter in our body, for example. But it is very useful. We'll talk all these aspects as we move on towards the detection, how we can utilize them. This is very easy to understand, right? So suppose a beta particle is passing through the matter. You see, alpha, beta, gamma, everything we call ionizing radiations. How a beta particle, which is fast moving electron, also causes the ionization. It is very simple. Electrons beta particles emitted by radioisotopes are having the energy somewhere around an average 0.222 MeV, which is quite high, and they come into the relativistic region velocity, their velocity if you compute. So they are pretty fast compared to the electrons. But electron is having negative charge, and bound electron also is having negative charge. How the interaction takes place? Like alpha particle attracts, beta particle, when it goes through the matter, it provides a kick to the electron that is bound, repulsive kick. That repulsion results in pushing out the electron from the influence of the atom, if the extent of the repulsion is more than the binding energy of the electron. Therefore, when the charged particles move through the matter, they produce ionization, irrespective of the charge they carry, whether they are positive or negative. Now, this is fine about ionization, but whenever you open a textbook, often you read, when radiation passes through the matter, it causes ionization or excitation. What is the meaning of it? You think about this electron, what I have written here. Again, my picture is here already. You think about this, an electron is given, I mean, it gets an impact from the passage of the radiation. If the extent of the energy is more than the binding energy, it will be removed from the influence, it will be detached from the atom. But if it is not adequate to remove the electron, in other words, the extent of the energy transfer is less than the binding energy of the electron, then what happens? Electron gets that energy, the electron in the atom gets that energy, but that is not adequate for itself to get detached from the atom. But because of additional energy, it starts moving faster. When it is moving faster, then the orbit in which it is moving is not sufficient to keep it inside there. So it moves to the next orbit. What we call this? Excitation. So when the radiation passes through the matter, it will cause either ionization if the energy transferred from the electron from the charged particle to the bound electron is more than the binding energy, you get ionization. Otherwise, it results in excitation. This is very simple. Once it is clear, rest of things are very simple. Now we know that in nature, most of the matter is in the combined state, means in the form of molecules. When they are in the molecules, if the radiation passes through the matter, if it influences an electron, then it will result in either ionization, molecular ionization, or excitation. Suppose, for simplicity, let us imagine a diatomic molecule. A diatomic molecule, pen. Suppose we have a diatomic molecule, for simplicity we call, right? And if the radiation is passing along the binding, along the bond, then what will happen? This molecule, this diatomic molecule, or need not be same like nitrogen, it can be HCl, right? Once this molecule is there, it is having its own natural vibration. And if its vibration is having certain frequency, and if the radiation passes through here, because of the interaction, Coulombic interaction, it will part with some energy, and that bond energy, that energy can be around the bond. So the frequency at which this diatomic molecule is moving, vibrating, it will get more energy. In the process, it may snap the bond. When it snaps the bond, we call it as bond breaking and radical formation. So you will get, suppose if this is an atom A and this is B, then you get A dot B dot radicals. You know that free radicals are oxidative species. They are a headache if they are in the body, right? So we use antioxidant to take care of it. We are not worried about it. As far at this stage, as far as the detection is concerned, both ionization and excitation are very useful. So I would like to repeat this because this is an important concept. We should understand that when a charged particle passes through the matter, it transfers part of its energy by Coulombic interaction to the bound electron. If that energy is more than the binding energy of that electron in the matter, then ionization takes place. Otherwise, still some energy is transferred. Therefore, that electron, which is moving in an inner orbit or any orbit, it has to go to the higher orbit. Otherwise, it cannot be accommodated in the atom, what we call excitation. Whereas in a polyatomic molecule, if the radiation passes through along the bond, there is a possibility of snapping of the bond. In the process, you get the free radical production. For the detection purpose, first two processes are important. Now, this is when charged particles are easy to understand. What happens to the non-charged particles, right? So, you just see now, if the radiations are like gamma or neutron, now how they will interact? They don't have charge. So what happens is, since they have the large amount of the kinetic energy compared to the electron kinetic energy, electrons velocity in the atom, then these uncharged radiations will transfer some energy if they undergo scattering or absorption. And that may result in producing the charged particles. In the case of the photons, that is gamma rays or X-rays, they will produce in a process electrons. Like photoelectric absorption, electrons are liberated. Compton scattering, electrons are scattered. Pair production, a pair of electron and positron are produced, which I will explain later when we go to that interaction of gamma radiation. So these, in uncharged radiations, for uncharged radiations, the interaction is a two-step process as far as the detection is concerned. Once it has to interact either by scattering or absorption, transfer a bit of energy or total energy depending on the process. And if that energy is carried by a charged particle, those charged particles will act as the agents for the initial uncharged radiations. For example, again, photoelectric absorption. If a photon is absorbed by photoelectric effect, it liberates an electron, and that electron carries most of the energy of the initial gamma ray. And once you produce an electron, fast-moving electron, its interaction is very similar to the interaction of the beta particle, very similar. So that can cause ionization and excitation, which can be utilized for the detection, as well as the other effects also we can understand. So compared to the charged particles, uncharged radiations have the low probability or low cross-section for the interaction. It is obvious. First and foremost, a favorable condition should be there in which it has to undergo a scattering or absorption. Okay. Once this slide is clear, rest of the things are quite simple. Now, so what happens? The ultimate result of passing of radiation through matter is, if it interacts, the result is either ionization or excitation or dissociation, that is radical formation. Now, this will be useful because the moment it happens in a material, if it is inanimate material, it will bring physical and chemical changes. If it happens in the body, it brings biochemical changes. Imagine A hemoglobin molecule, if it becomes an ion, its capability of binding with oxygen will be reduced. So therefore, it affects. If it is a chemical material, you are dealing with the neutral molecule, for example, but if it is exposed to radiation and causes ionization is produced, then that interaction will be totally different. So physical, chemical, and biochemical changes are happen, and it is very, very important to understand, be it for detection purpose or health physics or just general human health, right? Health physics means monitoring. For all the things, it is very, very important. So as whatever I told, I wrote here, radiation detection. This is very useful to have, to know, to understand what is the extent of ionization and excitation. Radiological protection, one should know to what type of radiation it is, how we can compute the effects, and radiation chemistry, particularly the third one, dissociation and producing the radicals, even for human health. All these aspects one can study if you have a basic understanding about interaction of radiation with matter. I suppose you are understanding, otherwise you ask me, you can stop and ask. Now, as this two lectures are meant for the measurement of radiation, so let us focus on that as those aspects. So for radiation measurement, one must understand interaction of radiation with matter. Second one is very important, extent of ionization or excitation if you are using excitation. And when you want to fabricate a detector, you should know what is the range, how long this radiation will move and before it gets attenuated. That's very important because it decides the size of the radiation detector. So these three aspects one should understand. Now, for measurement purpose, every material is not suitable. For example, you know, when ionization you want to measure, our mind quickly goes to using a copper wire or a gold wire. No, this is no use, because whether a movement of the electron or ionization, ultimately electricity is produced or a potential difference is produced, converted to that. If that is the thing, you cannot use very good conductors because it cannot differentiate between, how that electron movement or electricity is produced. Is it due to interaction of radiation or general ambient temperature? We don't know. That's why good conductors are not good detectors. Then the next one, suppose you take the case of carbon, which is an insulator, right? It's a bad conductor, right? And that will not, you will not get any information. So suitability of materials, we should be very careful. We should have the material which has a threshold, and definitely it should be a conductor also. That's why semiconductors or equivalent gas, etc., are very, very useful. We'll discuss them later. So suitability of the material we should know. Then how to get this? Okay, you got the signal. How to process this signal? Because a signal that is produced, we should extract and make it into a measurable signal, a displayable signal. So signal processing is very important. Therefore, you need very good electronics because we are dealing with minute changes, and measurement methods over and above reproducible measurement methods we should have. We should understand the principles behind it. And of course, spectrum analysis. Last part I won't be covering because that will take a lot of time. And if you take up the nuclear science, obviously that you will learn first. So to have for radiation measurement, first we should understand the basics of the interaction. Then we should know about the materials, then a bit of electronics and measurement methods and spectrum analysis. So now you see, before we proceed further, we should have some idea about the ionizing radiations. Alpha, beta, gamma, etc. in general are called ionizing radiation because what I have told already explained. So there are heavy charged particles also, like besides alpha, proton, fission fragments. Fission process, I just mentioned about the energy liberated in fission. Process Dr. Tomar will cover. Source for them is actinide isotopes and nuclear fission process. Electrons, charged particles, they are charged radiations. They are produced in beta decay, in conversion electron process, that is a competing process to gamma D excitation. So, auger electron or OJ electron, whatever way you pronounce, this is again a competing process for the X-ray emission. And all these sources we can use depending on the application. And many unstable isotopes are the sources for them. Electromagnetic radiation, both gamma and X-ray we call electromagnetic, they are electromagnetic radiation. Unstable isotopes and Bremsstrahlung. Bremsstrahlung means white radiation. Lunk in Deutsch is radiation. Bremsstrahlung, that is white radiation, electromagnetic radiation. Okay. And that process I will explain when we talk about the beta decay process, beta interaction. Uncharged particles like neutrons, or again, you can club them in the ionizing radiations, and reactors, nuclear fission, and isotope sources are the sources for producing these radiations. We have to understand from the interaction that the ultimate interaction is the electrons, with the electrons, whether it is direct Coulombic for the charged particles or indirect two-step process for the non-charged radiations. The end interaction is with the electrons. Therefore, interaction probability is directly related to the atomic number and atom density, rho Z or NZ. I'll explain you when we go through it. Now, I told you in the beginning, we should know the ranges of ionizing radiations. For sure, this might have been covered by Tomar in the radioactivity. Alpha particles are stopped by a thin sheet of paper, that means their range is very, very small. When you deal with alpha detection, obviously we have to go with the vacuum-based detectors or source inside the detector, like gas-filled detectors. Electrons, that is beta, they need about 1 to 3 mm of aluminum foil, thick aluminum foil, thickness we are talking about. That means that they will have they travel a distance before they get attenuated, and electron interaction is slightly different than alpha, which I will show in a picture. And gamma interacts with the matter as in a two-step process. You have to remember, whenever there is no charge for a radiation, the interaction is probabilistic. That means they may interact, they may not interact, and pass through silently also. That is obviously then this will be following an exponential variation with the thickness of the material. Larger the thickness of the material, and more probable it is its interaction. Its interaction is more probable. In fact, if you want to stop a gamma ray, particularly for shielding, when we work, we would not like to expose to gamma radiation of high energy. So you have to use about 10 to 15 centimeter thick lead. If it is an open class, I would ask you why. As I told you, the interaction probability depends on Z, because number of electrons it provides, and atom density. So a dense material like lead, which is having atomic number 82, is one of the most useful materials to use as shielding material to stop the electrons. That is between us and the source. If you remember, I don't wish that you should go to hospital. An X-ray operator in a government hospital, I am very particular, in a government hospital, they will be wearing a coat which has a thin layer of the lead. After all, X-rays have to be, a patient has to be exposed to X-rays to get the picture, not the operator. So operator has to be protected. So here the purpose of the interaction is to understand what should be the thickness of the shielding between the source and the operator and us. Suppose we do a chemical separation or a physics experiment. There is no need to expose ourselves to radiation. So we keep a shielding. Now, in the case of neutron again, it is uncharged radiation, ionizing radiation, but a two-step process. Again, this also depends on, this is also probabilistic. Therefore, I is equal to I0 e power minus mu t. The thickness comes into the picture. In this case, instead of mu, we put a cross-section, probability for the absorption to take place. And you need a material that has higher absorption capability of neutron. The best material is, one of the best materials is hydrogen, because hydrogen is having one proton. It can happily accommodate another neutron to get converted to a deuteron. Though loosely bound, nevertheless, it takes care of the neutron. That is one. Number two, it will also be, see, it is equal mass to neutron on an average, 1 AMU approximately. So in scattering or collisions, a neutron can lose its energy or it gets moderated. For both the purposes, hydrogenous material is used. Another one is, of course, boron. Boron has a high cross-section, and so borated water also is used, either paraffin wax or borated water. In both the cases, hydrogen is available in abundance there. Okay, so these are the typical ranges. Accordingly, when one plans to fabricate a detector, we definitely should know what could be the size of the detector. Now, let us start one by one. Heavy charged particles, we will only deal with the alpha and proton, because fission products is a rare, very specified thing, right? Once we understand this, we can extrapolate, though not exactly extrapolation, but it will help. So this is mainly Coulombic interaction with atomic electrons. In that process, an alpha particle will lose its energy. So one of the things is it has to continuously lose its energy so that we get a picture about the total energy it possesses. Then only we can measure its energy and we can characterize. The whole idea is to find out whether it is an alpha. Of course, we will be having some idea about it. And then how long it will go. Range is directly related to the energy, kinetic energy it carries. Therefore, we have to understand what could be the range. And we should arrange the detector geometry such that these alpha particles are attenuated inside the volume of the detector. So here, how it interacts is, how it moves. So along the path, it loses the energy. And that continuous losing the energy is an important thing so that it will reach a stage where its velocity will become comparable to the molecules, velocity of the molecules, surrounding molecules, what we call thermalization or attenuation. And that specific ionization loss is given by NZ, Z square by M0 V square. Here capital Z belongs to the medium and small z is for the particle. In the case of alpha, it is 2. M0 V square, half M0 V square is the kinetic energy of the alpha particle. So specific ionization an alpha particle produces in the matter is pretty high. So now the terms I have explained here, whatever I explained, I wrote here. And now in one collision, how much energy an alpha particle will transfer to an electron, that we can calculate. Once we calculate, we will understand that the energy transferred is pretty high, yet it's a small fraction compared to its own kinetic energy. Pretty high compared to the ionization potential, okay, ionization energy. So here we will see that there are formulae to calculate, I mean, this is based on the collision, which we will not go into this. This is a simple derivation, whereas later we get complicated derivations. We take the final form and discuss. So this is approximately, this is equal to mass of electron into mass of alpha particle by mass of electron plus mass of alpha whole square into kinetic energy of the alpha particle, and is approximately 4 me by ma e alpha. And when you calculate this, it comes to, if you start with a 4 MeV alpha particle, the initial collision, you transfer 2 kilo electron volts energy to an electron. That means, ionization energy on average is in gaseous molecules is something like 14 eV. But in fact, it varies from 7-8 eV to up to maximum 18 eV. So this energy is so high. What will happen to this energy? In turn, this electron which is produced will cause ionization in the same spot, more or less in the same spot, along the spot. I mean, from there onwards, it will produce ionization. And whereas the remaining energy for alpha particle, that is, the remaining energy, see, from 4 MeV, only a small fraction of energy is transferred in the first instant of collision or Coulombic interaction. So 2 keV out of 4000 keV. So still a lot of energy is there. That is why when the alpha produces a lot of ionization along its path, since its mass is nearly 8000 heavier than electron, it goes like a straight line, a knife in the butter, straight line. It goes in a straight line. It produces straight tracks. If you have a track detector, one can measure. So it produces a lot of ionization, primary ionization, and subsequently to that, the secondary electrons that produces further ionization. What earlier days called delta rays, but it is just ionization. In the case of 4 MeV protons, the formula obviously mass is less. Therefore, the energy transferred will be more, and it will be about 8 keV in one go. Again, this 8 keV is much higher. Therefore, it will also produce secondary ionization. So from this, what we have to remember is, when an alpha particle is passing through the matter, it produces ionization by transferring its own energy to one of the bound electrons. And if you calculate that energy with an example here, it is much more than the ionizing energy of the medium. Therefore, it will cause secondary ionization. But what we measure is, as far as the timing is concerned, our measurement is slower than the process of interaction. Therefore, we measure the entire charge. That's an important point you have to note. Okay. Now, this is the thing what I wrote. Very small fraction of energy is lost per collision, and particle undergoes many collisions before it comes to rest, what we call thermalization. You see, the paths look like this. But you see, one out of many, there is a backscattering. If you recollect Rutherford's experiment, this is the thing, what we call backscattering, right? Rutherford's backscattering. That's a nuclear collision. Whereas all others are collisions with the electronic. I mean, both are Coulombic collisions, but this one is more useful for our detection. This one has many good applications in characterizing materials. That's Rutherford backscattering. Okay. Now, this is the thing what I explained already. The energy transferred is large compared to binding energy of electrons in the medium. It results in secondary ionization, what we call delta rays. As I told you, the measurement time, by the time we get hold of the signal, that is a slower process compared to the process that happens. So we get the total energy. We measure the total ionization. Okay. Now, how this varies along the track? Because we should get some idea about the range. And alpha particle is the best one to get the range, alpha or proton, because they move in straight lines. So if you plot the range, residual range, the scale you just say reverse order, and it will be like this, because this specific ionization, right, in the full range, means in the beginning, it will be very small because its residence time is low. It depends on the velocity. As it reaches to almost zero energy, then you get the maximum ionization, right? And in fact, here there is I mean, always there is a confusion in understanding the Bragg curve. If you have any specific questions, you can write to me. And here, if you plot relative number of density of alpha particles as a function of distance, nearly you get a constant value throughout because it is moving very fast. No alpha particle is lost. Alpha particle intensity does not change. In fact, we use it advantageously to measure the thickness of any thin foils, because alpha particle intensity does not change. It only loses its energy. So it transmits, it gets, it passes through. But at the end of the range, what happens is, when it is getting towards thermalization, it starts picking the electrons. And we are not dealing with the one single alpha. We are talking about an alpha source with a beam, I mean, substantial number of alpha rays. So what happens is, until that stage, the intensity of the alpha particles does not change. And at the end, once it starts picking up electrons, getting neutralized or thermalized, then it becomes helium gas atoms. At this stage, it starts falling off. Still, there is a straggling. It is not single go. Why is it so? Because the ionization energy required per ionization need not be uncertainty, need not be constant. At the same time, all the alpha particles that are produced will have a small variation. And together, it will cause a small difference in ranges of individual alpha particles of the same source expected to be having the same energy. That we call energy straggling. So it is very simple. Fortunately, it is like almost like an S curve. If you differentiate this, you get an inverted peak, and the centroid exactly corresponds to the average range. And that also corresponds to 50% of intensity. And this is the range, what we know. So always, the detectors will have slightly bigger dimension than the range. Okay. We will leave alpha particles. In this, we discussed about the ionization, its formula, how much energy is transferred, and what is the range energy relation, and finally, how to determine the range. It is valid for proton also. Okay. So we talk about electrons. Electrons is slightly tricky. The electrons we are talking about in beta decay, and any fast moving electron, particularly beta decay we are talking about. The mass of an electron, moving electron, will be slightly more than the mass of an bound electron because of relativistic effect, right? But nevertheless, they are comparable. Therefore, when they are comparable, unlike alpha, which is about nearly 8,000, is heavier, so it moves like an elephant in a field where there are lots of bees. Whereas here, the electron, fast-moving electron, but for the energy, this is similar to the electron that is in the matter. So if an electron comes and interacts coulombically with another electron, bound electron, it not only transfers its energy and may cause ionization or excitation, but it gets its path gets changed. Whereas in the case of alpha, path is not changed. Once it starts in a direction, it continues. Whereas in the case of the beta, its direction gets changed. From here, in one scattering, it will go up. From there, it will go forward. Like that, it will have a tortuous path. And they are not reproducible paths. Suppose if a source is giving about a few thousands of electrons of same energy, same beta max, let us say single beta max, still when they are moving through the matter, successive collisions will change the direction of the initial electron. Therefore, this path is tortuous path. It's undergoing trouble. It's not straight line. Because of this, what happens is the range is not as simple as we do in alpha, in finding out alpha range. So finding out beta range is a transmission experiments we do and get it. But the question is, it is not a straight line. Not only that, one more thing we should remember, when the electron interacts with a bound electron in the medium, it can as well get at some point of time backscattered. Instead of going forward, there is every possibility that it will go backward. It will come out of the medium. Normally, a radiation source we keep on a backing. Again, it will come back, and again it can go into the detection medium. Therefore, at times we overestimate the beta decay. So please remember, electron interaction is slightly or rather pretty different compared to the interaction of the heavy charged particles. And their path is not straight line. And its interaction is, comparatively pretty low because it's having a low stopping power, right? Because of this way of going, because the transfer of the energy depends on the mass, right? You just see here, dE by dx, that is how much energy it is losing, therefore minus sign. dE by dx is proportional to nz by m0v square, right? And here, that energy transferred in one collision is pretty small compared to alpha particle or proton, because there the mass of the alpha and proton are in the denominator. Here it is mass of the electron. So straight, if you talk about alpha, 8,000 times it is lower, right? So this ionization power is pretty low. Okay. Now this is about Coulombic. Now there is another issue here. You see, when a charged particle is moving at high speed, you please remember that electrons of about 0.25 MeV, that is 250 keV, its velocity corresponds to 0.75 c. We have to consider the relativistic considerations. And the speed is pretty high. So if electrons are moving at any charged particle moving at that speed in a medium having its own electrons, then there is a possibility these interactions, these Coulombic interactions, can result in the deflections. And these deflections can accelerate. They can accelerate, they can decelerate. Can accelerate, acceleration we will understand first. Accelerate. Once it accelerates, if you remember electromagnetic theory, that an accelerating particle or even decelerating, accelerating particle will emit electromagnetic radiation. And that radiation we call Bremsstrahlung radiation. And so there are two types of interactions. One is Coulombic interaction, other one is radiative interaction. Why are we interested? Because we are interested in the total loss of the energy, how it is losing the energy. So this Bremsstrahlung effect will become prominent when we move towards when we have higher energy or higher atomic number material. So this is the thing we have to keep in, and the relation between the a radiative interaction to the Coulombic interaction is proportional to energy, proportional to atomic number of the medium, and inversely, and it has to be divided by 700 approximately. This is the approximate relation. Unless energy is few MeV, this won't be an issue. But we use with the absorber material from aluminum to lead, so Z is pretty high. So it is the question of energy region. So, and at the end of the thing, what we have to remember is the energy loss is by two processes. And we are more interested in this because we are interested in measuring the ionization that is. So range, how do we measure the range of beta radiations or electrons produced in an accelerator? Very simple experiment always. You keep an absorber, you keep the source on other side, here you keep a detector and you measure the number of electrons that are coming out. So if you measure the intensity of the electrons, initial intensity, you know, you are using a known strength source, and then they will be getting reduced as a function of the thickness. See, we will be using here different foils of different thickness. As we increase the thickness, the intensity also will get reduced. We are fixing the energy, fixing the initial intensity, then go on keeping an absorber in between the detector and the source and measure the intensity, take the ratio. One gets almost a curve like this. From this, we have to extrapolate here by drawing a tangent. We get the range of the electron. And whereas if you talk about the beta decay spectrum, this bulging part gets averaged out and we get on a logarithm scale straight line. Okay, so and our concern is generally measurement of beta spectrum and radioisotopes, betas from radioisotopes. So beta spectrum is like this, if you remember yesterday's class, and this with the absorber thickness, if you take on a logarithm scale, it comes as a straight line. That is exponential nature, right? So once we know the range, we can plan about the length of the length and volume of the detector. Okay, and here there are two aspects we have to remember while measuring a radioisotope strength, that is particularly intensity. We have to consider backscattering, which will enhance the counting intensity, because when it gets backscattered, if you remember the first slide of beta interaction, some of the electrons may get back from it will go back, and in the backing, they get again backscattered to move forward. There will be, if it is not scattered into the detector, that is a loss in the intensity. If it is scattered into the detector, that is gain. So that has to be, one has to do an experiment. There's something called feathers plot. There is a way to do it. And in fact, in our training school, we used to do this experiment. We can calculate what could be the backscattering. And more importantly, this is a nuisance because some of the electrons that are produced in beta decay can be absorbed in the sample. Therefore, in most of the radiation measurements, not for gamma, for charge particle measurement, the source should be as thin as possible. We call it as infinitely dilute or infinitely dilute sample, infinitely small, thick sample, very, very thin sample you have to make. In fact, we make either foils or we electrodeposit and make thin sources on, or rather molecular layer sources on backing. Now, as far as the gamma and alpha, which again gamma samples are concerned, there are some liberties. Still, ideally, if we have thin samples, they are the best. Okay. Now, okay. Now we talk about electromagnetic radiations. We leave the charged particles there, electromagnetic radiations. Let us recap what we have discussed in the first slide or second slide. For uncharged radiations, they have to undergo a scattering or absorption, that is the one step, and they have to produce the charged particles which will act as the agents. So it's a two-step process. So we have to see the materials that has higher probability for scattering or absorption. Then we think about the second point. There are mainly three processes by which gamma ray interacts. There are about 9 processes. We will not even list them. 3 processes are very important in terms of for measurement, and that in all these 3 processes, net result is electron is produced after interaction. And in some instances, like photoelectric effect, nearly full energy is transferred, but we can account for full energy. This is extremely useful for gamma spectrometry. But in the case of the Compton scattering, it's a nuisance because interaction will be continuous, so it creates background. But it also can be used in some cases if you are interested in finding out the intensity. In the case of pair production, the third part, in specific cases where you deal with the high energy gamma rays, that can be used profitably. Now, what are the 3 major things? Just now I spelled out: photoelectric effect, Compton scattering, and pair production. Now, what is photoelectric effect? The name, a photon is interacting with the matter. Again, for simplicity, I have taken an isolated atom. Ideally, isolated atoms, in reality, isolated atoms rarely exist other than gold and silver, right? They also often you see in combined states. Whereas, for simplicity, we take this case, an incident photon, which is shown as like this, interacts with the atom. Here, please remember, in some textbooks, they say it knocks off an electron. Sorry, wrong. The energy is transferred to the atom as a whole. Energy is absorbed. The full energy is absorbed. And that energy, in turn, is transferred to one of the bound electrons. If the energy permits, it will be to the most tightly held electron. So nearest electron to the nucleus, it will be transferred. But in the process, you spend binding energy of the electron. So nearly 99.9% of the energy is carried away by this electron as its kinetic energy. So photon is absorbed, an electron is produced. Photoelectric absorption. And that electron will act as the agent for the photon. In the process, rest of the things, ionization, excitation, etc. That's all the process about this one. A photon interacts with the absorbed atom and disappears completely. An electron is emitted from the bound shells. And the energy transferred to electron as kinetic energy is h nu, that is the energy of the photon, what I have written as E, and binding energy of the electron. And what happens to the remaining energy, that binding energy? That in turn, it is creating a vacancy in the innermost orbital. Therefore, immediate electron, next electron will come, if you remember Bohr's theory, occupies this and an X-ray is produced in the same site. That also will be detected. Like that, in successive X-ray production, all the X-rays in the same site will be detected. So you get the full information about the total energy. So photoelectric absorption is full energy signature of the gamma ray, and very useful, as I told you. And probability for the photoelectric effect depends on the Z power 4 to 5 and inversely proportional to gamma energy to the tune of 3.5. Therefore, this photoelectric effect is having high cross section in the low energy region. Okay. And also it has a better cross section when you move to the high Z materials like lead. But like lead is useless as far as the detector is concerned, but it is extremely useful as the shielding. Now let us understand Compton scattering. Compton scattering is, by the name, Compton is the discoverer, scattering. It's a process in which a photon moving with an energy E, which is equal to h nu, and that will interact directly with a loosely bound electron. And compared to the velocity of this bound electron velocity is almost negligible relativistically, and therefore it is like a collision, as if this photon is colliding with the electron. In the process, it sets the photon into motion and at the expense of its own energy. So photon energy will be reduced. The difference between h nu and h nu dash is transferred as the kinetic energy. And it will be, compared to original direction, this photon gets scattered and also electron will be in the opposite direction. From kinematics, we can derive a relation. More importantly here, this is the relation. Important thing is it can have, that angle can vary between 0 to 180. Therefore, the energy transfer, which is h nu minus h nu dash, is not constant. It can vary between 0 to almost h nu minus 255 EV, 255 EV. Yeah. So this energy is not full energy transfer. Moreover, it is not unique energy. Therefore, it gives signal because electron is set into motion with different energies. So therefore, it can provide the signal from 0 to h nu minus m0 e square by 2. And that is 255 keV. So for example, if you talk about 2 MeV photon, you get the signal from 0 to up to 1745 keV, which will be a nuisance or essentially is a background. So we often use detectors in such a way that we can reduce this Compton, what we call Compton suppression detectors. If I get the time, I will show you a photo in the next class. So this is actually a nuisance most of the times, okay? So probability for this Compton scattering is directly proportional to the Z. It's a botheration and inversely proportional to the energy. It remains for quite some time. It has a definite probability. Because of the angle can be between 0 to 180, you get variety of values, as I told already. So let us move quickly to the pair production. Probably I have to close there. Saibal? Oh, Saibal is not there.
Yes, I'm here.
Yes. So I can take 3-4 minutes.
Yeah, sure. Please. Don't bother at all. Please go ahead.
Okay, I have only 3 slides, and if I can complete that is great. Otherwise, I can stop. Pair production. This is an important concept. Another important concept. Yeah. In this process, a photon of h nu, it interacts and it can produce a pair. If you remember, yesterday I was mentioning, it can produce an electron and positron simultaneously, right? So how it happens? Like you have electrons occupying positive states, antiparticles, positrons occupy negative states. Without going into details, to bring that to the detachable state, you need about twice the rest mass energy. So if that is equal to 1.012 MeV, if you have that energy, a photon, this is a possibility that it can produce a pair. Imagine you have 2 MeV energy. Where it goes, remaining energy? Remaining energy will be shared by 2 particles that are produced pair, electron and positron. And why electron is liberated along with the positron? For charge neutrality. Charge has to be conserved. If a positive charge is produced, a negative charge has to be produced. And at the point of production, right, that pair at the point of production, they move in opposite direction for conservation of the momentum. And while they are moving, that excess energy, they share equally. That's suppose 2 MeV energy is there, 2 MeV minus 1.02, that is minus 2 m0 c square. And that excess energy equally shared by both the electron and positron. So what is happening? An electron is absorbed, 2 charged particles are produced with kinetic energy. So they are in motion. Once the particles are produced and they have energy, they will interact coulombically. They produce ionization and excitation. So they will also act as the agents for the interacting photon. So particularly when you deal in astrophysics, where you deal with few MeV to tens of MeV gamma rays, there it is extremely useful. Rather, it is the only method to detect. But here, what is happening to that 1.0 to MeV, whatever is gone for liberating a positron? And that energy also, when, see, two masses are produced, is it not? When a positron is moving in the medium where there are lots of electrons, the electron pair which is produced, the pairing electron goes in the opposite direction. But this positron moving in the medium where there are lots of infinite number of, it's a sea of electrons. If it picks up an electron, and that will get annihilated and will produce 2 gamma rays of 511 keV, equivalent to rest mass energy. Therefore, entire energy is accounted, right? And that photon can undergo again interaction. In the process, you can at times get the full energy signal. But in pair production, if you are using as for detection purpose pair production, normally the escape peaks are used. That I will tell when we go to the gamma ray detection. We will leave it at this stage. Then the annihilation process is pair production is a process in which a photon of high energy, definitely more than 1.02 MeV, that is twice the rest mass of energy, it will undergo interaction by total absorption of that. It disappears in a nuclear field. That's very important. So nucleus is there, right? And it will produce a positron by spending 1.02 MeV. For charge neutrality, an electron is simultaneously produced. At the point of production here, both of them move in opposite direction for momentum conservation. The excess energy after spending this for producing the positron will be shared equally, and they go in opposite direction. And so in the process, you are getting two agents. Okay. So two-step process. Now, that is the thing what I have written, whatever I have told. Threshold is this, and then this also I explained you. And probability is directly proportional to Z square, and it rises sharply with the gamma energy, very sharply. So these three processes together, see, please remember one thing. Whenever gamma interaction takes place, you have to remember that same gamma ray will not undergo all the processes. You have infinite number of gamma rays in a source. Some of them may undergo photoelectric absorption, some may undergo Compton scattering, some may undergo pair production, and some may subsequently undergo photoelectric absorption, for example, Compton scattering, etc., etc. And gamma spectrometer, hopefully I will get time to cover that. So that you please remember. Therefore, we have to see the total cross-section while planning for a detector. Now, total cross-section. Here I have given an example in sodium iodide, which is a very good material for gamma spectrometry till recently. Even now we use. If you plot photon energy versus the total cross-section of the three processes, mu is the sum of the photoelectric cross-section plus Compton scattering cross-section plus pair production cross-section. The individual cross-section photoelectric is like this. This is obviously edge, means it is matching with the binding energy there for the K electron. Now, this is Compton scattering, which varies along the energy. And this is pair production. There is a threshold, then it starts shooting up as you go to higher energy. But normally in gamma spectrometry, our energy varies between 0 to 2 MeV, normally. But it rarely crosses 4 MeV, right? And therefore, we have to think about this region, how to make a detector. So pair production is not a big issue, okay? So once you know when you add all this photoelectric cross-section, Compton cross-section, and pair production cross-section, you get a total cross-section like this, and this decides the stopping power of the gamma rays and therefore the detector dimension. With this, gamma interaction is over. If we have patience for 5 minutes, I'll just tell about neutron and close it. Again, neutrons is this doesn't have a charge, so it is a two-step process. For neutron detections, one of the beauties is that the material is chosen such that it will act as a moderating medium. Why moderation is required, I will tell. And also a nuclear reaction material, so that representatives like charged particles are produced, and then that medium also can be used as the detector, right? So why neutrons have to be moderated is very simple. Faster neutrons in general have a lower cross section and therefore reduce its energy. That's called moderation. Whereas if you talk about our exam system, moderation means increase the marks. Now, and you have to choose a material where it facilitates a nuclear reaction with neutron. Product should be charged particle, proton, alpha, fission, and of course, this is a scattering process which we'll leave at this stage, right? So these charged particles will act as agents for the neutron. For example, if you talk about 10 boron, it has a very high cross section for neutron. After interacting with neutron, particularly if it is moderated and energy is thermalized, very, very low energy, then it will produce an alpha particle and also lithium-7. Both these particles, both alpha and 7 lithium, they will cause ionization if there is a medium. And this medium, boron is made as a gas, BF3. You will appreciate in the next lecture about the gas field detectors. So boron is taken as BF3 gas and in a tube, and in that neutron will be moderated, and then of course we actually arrange a moderation outside itself, and that neutron will interact with boron, means boron will be target material for the nuclear reaction, and BF3 gas will act as the detector for producing ionization. And ionization is produced by both alpha and lithium in this case. That you should remember, please. Alpha, suppose you are talking about heavy nucleus, we talk about alpha, whereas lithium also produces pretty good amount of ionization. Similarly, helium-3 is another good detector. By itself is the gas. A neutron, by reacting with it, it will produce a proton and tritium. Both will cause ionization in helium itself. So here helium also acts as the target material for nuclear reaction and also detector medium for interaction to produce the ionization. So a neutron interacts by nuclear reaction, produces the charged particle which acts as an agent, and the same target material you take in such a way, it will act as a detector also, and these charged particles will cause ionization. So this is the thing, a general principle of neutron interaction and detection. The rest of the things are reading material. So essentially, we use BF3 gas, and there we keep here ionization produced by both these we measure. We keep this source inside a high density polyethylene material which will help facilitate the moderation of the neutron energy. And with that, I summarize. Summarize is self-reading. Sorry for overshooting the time. Alpha, beta, gamma causes ionization, excitation, dissociation in the matter. They pass through. It causes ionization or excitation, which are useful for detection. It also can produce the radicals, and interaction depends on the N and Z, because ultimate step is the photoelectric. Most of the cases that presence of electron is important, and how many such atoms are there, N, Z. Detection and measurement depend on unique signal generation. Range decides the detector configuration. Charged particles, Coulombic interaction, etc., 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 which I have already covered. Thank you very much.